Well, good afternoon. It is my pleasure to be with you this afternoon, and I will be talking to you about the importance of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And also, I will be sharing my involvement in the 1960 lunch counter sit-in, and all that led to the passing of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So hopefully this afternoon you will have an appreciation for the liberties and for the freedom that you have today, and all the opportunities that are ahead of you today. And so you just have to apply yourself and take advantage of those opportunities because they're in place now. A number of years ago, they were not in place for you, okay? And I know for many years, I did not share my involvement in the civil rights movement. Even though I was involved in 1960, I did not share it with my family, my wife, nor my children. Now, why didn't I share it with them? Because, okay, somebody?
He said it was top secret.
No, some of the things I was involved in the Air Force were top secret, but not that. And the reason why I did not share that with my family or anyone, because I wanted to avoid a stigma being attached to me or a stigma being attached to my family as a result of my involvement in the civil rights movement. Because back then, individuals that were involved in the civil rights movement, many of my friends weren't able to get jobs or maintain a decent job, obtain a decent job because of their involvement. And so I wanted to spare my family of that. And so almost 50 years, I never told anyone, okay? It wasn't until 2010, I was invited back to North Carolina, Greensboro, North Carolina A&T State University, to receive an award for my involvement. And I had to get a permission to participate in outside activity. So once Judge Grant became aware of it, of course, the word got out, okay? And so that's why I'm here today. So I've been speaking on this subject since that time, okay? And so, and hopefully you will learn something from what I have to share with you today. The 1964 Civil Rights Act is more profound than all previous Civil Rights Acts, as far as I'm concerned. Well, the Civil Rights Act passed in 1868 after the enactment of the 14th Amendment. Well, the Civil Rights Act passed in 1870 after the 15th Amendment was enacted. And that granted voting rights for African Americans. But this act is more profound in that now for the first time, it came with it an enforcement agency was created, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, to enforce that particular law. So all those prior laws, they simply were not enforced. And so we really did not derive the benefits of those laws because there was no enforcement agency. And this law brought about broad implications to our way of life today, to your way of life today, to my way of life today. Prior to the passing of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, we lived in a segregated society by law, which calls for the separation of African American and the white races. Racial segregation by law were referred to, those racial segregation laws were referred to as the Jim Crow laws. How many of you heard of Jim Crow laws? Okay. These laws were put in place around 1876, and those laws are outgrowth of the slave codes. So they were in effect up until 1965, a year after the passing of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So by de facto, we still was operating under the slave codes, outgrowth of the slave codes or the Jim Crow laws. And these laws call for racial discrimination against African American in places like hotels, movie theaters, restaurants, water fountain, vending machines. You will see a vending machine, let's say in a public place of public accommodation, they will have two vending machines. One would be marked as had a sign on it that said whites. And African Americans were not allowed to use that vending machine. They would have water fountain in public places. 2 water fountains. They're pretty close proximity. One would be marked white, and guess what? The other would be marked colored. You know, for some time, I wondered, was the water the same coming out of the white machine, white water fountain? So one particular day, I said, gee whiz, you know, it's all over the state and everywhere, you know, these white water fountains and colored water fountains. I wonder, is the water the same? So I decided to take a chance to violate the law. I admit it, I violated the law. I had to take a drink of that water. And guess what? It was the same. There was no difference. And also, vending machines have white and colored. And some vending machine was 2-sided. On one side, the vending machine was white, and color was prohibited from buying a soda from that vending machine. On the other side, it was colored. Now, you can use that machine, but sometimes on the colored side, it costs more for the same soda. So that means, I guess, you enjoyed it better, more, right? And so that was the kind of society that we lived in during that particular time. Schools, colleges, hospitals, they were all segregated. Discrimination was allowed by institutions, law enforcement, and all institutions that operated within our society. So it was a way of life, okay? The Jim Crow laws were designed to restrict the civil rights and civil liberties of African Americans and to relegate them as what? A second-class citizen, okay? I grew up under the Jim Crow law. My parents taught us to be respectful of our elders, be respectful of the laws, and be respectful of people in a position of authority. Now, that really carried us a long way. So if we did those kind of things, then we stayed out of trouble. Because if we got in trouble with the law, we weren't afforded the same benefit or opportunity of due process or justice under the law. And so if we stepped out of line, if our neighbor or anyone saw us step out of line, then they would take a role in kind of disciplining us as well to keep us in line. And so we knew our boundaries. So African Americans looked to education as a way of overcoming the stereotypes, as a way of overcoming misconception, as a way of gaining first-class citizenship. I am one of 8 siblings. I'm the 4th of 8 siblings. And I can recall telling my father that I wanted to go to college. No one in my family had gone to college before. So I'm in the 10th grade, and I said, Pop, I want to go to college. And he said, son, he said, I really want you to go, but there's no way you can go. He said, we cannot afford to send you to college, you know. I mean, there's 8 of us. And I said, Pop, don't worry about it. I will find a way. I was determined that I was going to find a way. I didn't know how, but I knew I was going to go to college. I had made up my mind. I was so determined that I began to tell people, my friends, hey, you know what? I'm going to college. I would tell my teachers, hey, I'm going to college. They said, well, how are you going to go to college? I don't know, but I'm going. Just so happened my history teacher really admired my determination. And he sent a way for me to take a National Science Foundation, a grant, to take a test for a grant, National Science Foundation grant. Took the test, I received that grant, and this grant was only to allow me to go to summer school. When I finished high school, this grant allowed me to go to summer school to take science courses on a college campus, to get experience in terms of the college life. So it was only just for that summer. And so while I was in summer school, I applied for a national defense loan. So I obtained a loan, and also I obtained a job in the post office. So now I can come back in September, back to college. So I can recall in February in college, I was a freshman, and I was a friend of the Greensboro Four. I guess all of you saw the video, the Greensboro Four. Okay, we stayed in the same dormitory. This was a large dormitory. And my friend Joe McNeil, he lived in New York. Ezel Blair lived in Greensboro. David Richmond lived in Greensboro. And David McCain lived in Washington, D.C. And so Joe McNeil would tell us about how despicable experience he had taking a bus from New York to Greensboro, North Carolina. He said by the time he got to Greensboro, North Carolina, he felt like he was a pariah. He felt like someone that's really lower than low, the way he was treated. He felt less human. He began to talk to us about just how despicable the treatment is, towards African Americans. So he and his friend, I did not know they were plotting to start the sit-in at Woolworth. The Woolworth store is something, I guess you could equate it to something like your Target, or maybe even larger. It was national, matter of fact, it was international. They had stores outside of this country. A large chain, headquarters in New York. And so Joe and his friends, I guess one afternoon, February 1st, as you would walk down the streets of Greensboro, you would pass Woolworth, and as you look in the window, you can see all the seats there, and African Americans were prohibited from sitting at the lunch counter, could not be served. And so it was somewhat of an eyesore, as you pass there, you just get disgusted. And so Joe and his friend decided, the other three decided, well, we're going to go in and sit down. So they decided to do that one afternoon. And they went in and sit down, and of course, they asked to be served. And well, first of all, they bought something in the store because to avoid being a trespasser. And that's what we did throughout the sit-in. We would purchase something to show that we're not trespassing. And the manager really didn't know what to do, how to deal with this. And he just stood back, and they just saw the film and just watched them and told his workers just leave them alone. They'll get tired, they'll go back to campus. So Joe came back to campus that night and began to share with us, what they had done. And he said, we need more people. We really need more people to go down, and began to tell me and others. I was not prepared to be one of those more people because I was thinking about self-preservation. As hard as it took me to get to college, now I'm going to go down and take a chance of being arrested. I had no one to bail me out. And if I couldn't work my job, if I get fired from my job, I'm out of college. So Joe, I commend you guys, but I'm not prepared to be one of those more people. So the next day it went down, about 2 dozen went down. And now the news media picks it up. It began to be broadcast. And the momentum really picks up. A student organization was formed, and a letter was sent to the president of the company asking them to desegregate their lunch counter. And they came back and said that, well, we're going to follow the tradition, the local tradition, and that is to maintain a separate lunch counter, a segregated lunch counter. So the third day, about 60 folks went down, and Joe came back, and it's all over the news now. Bennett College joined the group, high schools joined the group, and also a women's college, which is all white female college. Some of those students joined the group. And so Joe came back and nobody got arrested. And he said, now we need a lot of more people to go down. There's 63 bars, there's 63 stews there, and we need to top all of them. And so I began to think about it. So even if I did receive a college education, I still would be considered a second-class citizen. I still would have all those limitations, and I still would be treated as a boy, no matter what I achieved in life. Then I began to reflect on the day that I left home to go to college. I can recall my father driving me down to the bus station. And he was so happy. He has a son now going to college. I mean, I'd never seen a person so elated to have someone from his family going to college. So I checked my footlock and everything. They put it on the bus. I had a small handbag. My father gets on the bus with me. I went where I was supposed to go. And where was that? I went to the back of the bus. That's where I was supposed to go, right? And so my father, we were chatting for a while, and now other folks began to get on the bus in the white section. So my father said, well, it's time for him to leave. He better get off. As he tried to get off, the bus driver stopped him. We let him off and just cursed him out. Called him all kinds of names. You're no good in this, you're no good in that, in front of me and everybody else. And just seeing how he just stood there and took it. See what I mean? And then after the bus, there was no other way for me to get off the bus. It was only one door. So after the bus driver finished cursing him out, calling him all kind of no good this, then he said, okay, now you get off my GD bus. So as the bus pulled away, that big smile that was on my father's face, it was no longer there. It was, a frown was there. And I just began to pray as the bus began to pull off. I said, God, please let my father be treated like a man in his lifetime. The bus driver did not know my father. My father, in terms of calling him no good. My mother died when I was 10 years old. There was 8 of us. There was 4 younger than me. My 13-year-old sister began to play the role of the mother of the family. And he was a single parent, working 3 jobs. And I can recall my relatives, church people, folks coming to the house and telling him, John, there's no way a man can take care of 8 kids. And some of those are babies. You can't take care of them as a single parent. And so therefore, they began to say, I'll take this one, and some other ones say, no, I'll take that one. Somebody said, no, I'll take that one. And my father ended up putting them all out of the house. He said, nobody's going to take anyone. Because the last word that my mother said to him was, John, take care of my children. She had gone to the hospital that morning, and I can recall, just before we went to school, for a procedure. And during the procedure, she began to hemorrhage, and she needed blood. They needed blood transfusion for her. There was no blood in the black blood bank, but there was blood in the white blood bank upstairs. Blacks have to be treated in a segregated section, in the lower section, basement of the hospital. They refused to give us blood from the blood bank upstairs and told my father that he had to go out and find donors. So he said he went knocking on people's doors that he knew and people's doors that he did not know to try to get them to come to the hospital to give blood. You know, people's sense of urgency is not always the same as yours. See what I mean? And so by the time they got there and got prepped for the blood, my mother was dying. And her last words to him was, John, take care of my children. And so he was determined to do that. He said he's going to do that. And nobody's going to take any of his children. And so with that in mind, I decided, well, I'm going to join this movement. So that joined the movement. It was kind of hectic because by this time, with all the news coverage, there was a member of the Ku Klux Klan there. They were taunting us. And I must say that the policemen were very respectful. The only people they arrested two boys, two white boys there that was yelling out profanity in the store, and they were arrested. But they did not arrest any of us because we were just minding our business. We were reading studying our books at the lunch counter, and we were a patron of the store because we had bought an item. But things began to get out of hand one day, and then there was they call it bomb threat, you know, and so the manager said, okay, bomb threat, everybody has to leave. So as we entered the building and looked back, the manager and the staff was still in the building, but everybody else was outside. So if there's a bomb threat, you know, I guess they felt as though they were expendable. But they was trying to really get control of the situation. So the lunch counter closed for a period of time, for a week or so. The proprietors of the stores in Greensboro really went to the campus to talk to the president of the college, because we were disrupting business. We were disrupting business throughout the entire downtown Greensboro. And so they wanted the sit-in to stop. And so, so here again, they asked that, and the owner Woodworth, the manager, said he would write the company to see, again, if they would integrate. And they came back, and during this time, we had a moratorium on the sit-in. Came back again, and they stated that they would maintain the tradition. And so now the demonstration is back on again. Then the Business Association decided, well, we would take a survey of all the proprietors here in downtown Greensboro to see if they agreed to desegregate their establishment. And in the meantime, they asked for us to call another moratorium on the sit-in, and we did. So the survey revealed about 76% of the proprietors said yes, they should desegregate their establishment. That Woodworth should desegregate theirs, not theirs. So Woodworth again decided to go with the tradition and not desegregate their lunch counter. So now the demonstration really has really mushroomed, and really no one has been arrested. During the time when we had called a moratorium, we continued to move the demonstration over to the Crest store. And at the Crest store, a number of people did get arrested for trespassing. But we continued to keep the pressure on. Thurgood Marshall came to town. Thurgood Marshall was the legal counsel to the NAACP at the time, and he went on to be one of the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. And he encouraged us to keep the pressure on. And so we continued to keep the pressure on, and when school was out for the year in in May, the local high school, Dudley High School, the students continued to keep the pressure on Woolworth. On July the 26th, the store decided that they would desegregate the lunch counter because they wanted to do that before the students came back to college. They said, well, we better do it now because it's going to cause such major disruption if they don't. And it was affecting all the businesses down there and had really disrupted Woolworth's business because the demonstration was not only in Greensboro, but it's throughout the East Coast. And so they decided to desegregate. And so now this is the momentum that began to shift in terms of for the passage of a Civil Rights Act. Because the Jim Crow law was put in place, Jim Crow was put in place by a law. And therefore, it will take a law to dismantle Jim Crow. And so now the demonstration continued. The Freedom Riders in 1961, the sit-in, the March on Washington, 1963. And I just so happened to be part of that march in 1963, the demonstration on Washington. I don't know if I have time to tell that story. No?
You should tell the story because it's the best part.
Yeah, and I vividly remember going to Washington. Me and my current wife, we went to Washington to participate in the demonstration. And she had a Volkswagen Beetle. We drove that down to Washington from East Orange, New Jersey. And we were so anxious to get there, and all the traffic and all this, then we had to find a place to stay. We went to several places, no, there's no room. And we drove around, and finally found a place. Okay, they do have room. We ran in, registered, ran upstairs, put our things down, ran out, called it taxi, took us down to the mall in Washington. And you probably read a lot about what took place there. Dr. King's famous speech, mountaintop speech, was a great day. Afterwards, we went out to dinner, and now it's time, okay, let's go back to the hotel. So I called, got a taxi, called for a taxi. We jump in a taxi, and he said, where you want to go? I don't know. We left everything in the room, the keys, everything. I don't even remember the name of the hotel. And so I said, look, it's in Northeast Washington, and the building kind of looked like this. And so he drove us around for about an hour, then he pulled to the curb and said, get out. I said, this is not the place. He said, you don't know where you're going, get out. So he put us out. And luckily I had enough money to pay him. I said, okay, I'll get another taxi. So I got another taxi. He drove us around for about an hour. And it just so happened I saw a policeman. This guy was getting frustrated too. I saw a policeman. I said, hey, stop, stop, stop. So I jumped out and went to the policeman. I said, look, I checked into a hotel down here, and I don't know the name of it. I don't know what street it's on or anything like that. But let me describe it. This is what it looks like. He said, oh, it's around the corner. And so thank God, you know. But I will never forget that experience in terms of the 1963 March on Washington. The Civil Rights Act was signed by President Lyndon B. Johnson in 1964. And that led to the dismantling of all the segregation and all the Jim Crow laws. You know, not only did we have Jim Crow laws, but also there was a code, a Jim Crow code that we had to operate by, had to live by, how we interact with white individuals. For example, a black person was never to assert or even intimate that a white person was lying. Never impute dishonorable intention to a white person. Never suggest that a white person is from an inferior class. Never lay claim or to suggest superiority over a white person. Never curse a white person. Never laugh cynically at a white person. And never comment or show signs of endearment by a black man towards a white female, because that could bring a death sentence. And so those are the kind of things, laws that we have to live under. And so you can see now just how important the 1964 Civil Rights Act is, because it brought about a dismantling of all of that. And now we can really achieve your goals, your dreams. And so it's up to us now to pursue our goals and dreams, because those limitations has been lifted. And so I would encourage you to take advantage, pursue your goals and dreams. Okay? Okay, now thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.